Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sean's Check In. If this is your first time watching me, feel free to catch up by going to my Facebook professional page, Sean P. Daughtry, LICSW, and watching other previous videos there on other topics I discuss. Or you can go to my YouTube channel, Sean D., Sean's Little Check In, or Sean's Check In. Today, I wanted to talk about the concept of compassion, which is a word that is brought up a lot. And more, I do experience it as being in the general public domain, including within mental health professional circles, which is really great and refreshing to see. When I was growing up, that term seemed to be very much associated with something that came out of religious circles and schools of thought, such as Buddhism and what have you. It is fortunately spread more and more, I've noticed over the decades, into, like I said, the public domain, including in psychotherapy, which is just great. In the mid 90s, when I was in graduate school at a very respected psychodynamic focused school for clinical social work, that word compassion really didn't seem to be brought up or discussed much at all. The term empathy was certainly brought up quite a bit and discussed, and the importance of having empathy is part of being a good, effective listener as a psychotherapist. But the term compassion was hardly really discussed or mentioned at all. I'd like to think that that school brings it up more now these days. I'm not sure. But what I do understand more and more, the longer I've worked in the field as a psychotherapist and the longer I've been a human being on this earth, is that compassion, which is one of the 8 C's or essential qualities of self, according to internal family systems theory. And you can find a list of the 8 C's of self online very readily. It'll just pop right up for you. But compassion is one of those, along with curiosity. Um, anyway, what I'm saying is that there is a big difference between compassion and empathy. Uh, Many people know what empathy is, but I'll just say clearly here the differences between compassion and empathy and how one is a starting place and the other is an ongoing place to be in, that of compassion. Empathy is the state of feeling what another is feeling directly. So being in the shoes of another's person's suffering or people's suffering and difficulties and feeling what they are directly feeling and feeling that directly yourself. Compassion is the awareness of others' sufferings and difficulties and the wish for them to no longer be suffering. There's a big difference there. Empathy is a direct feeling state. So if you are filled with empathy for another or others, you are essentially filled with pain and ultimately paralyzed in that pain of another or others if you stay in an empathetic state or place, feeling full empathy. Um, Whereas compassion, there is a direct understanding of distance between you and another or others. You feel for them and their suffering and wish them well and better. So there's a huge difference there. Empathy is a good starting place. You feel empathy. It lets you know that empathy, that is, that you're steeped in momentarily with a person or people. It lets you know how they feel. That is very informative. It's a big, huge signal or set of signals, if you will. But what you want to do is get space from that empathy, have that go down in intensity inside of you, and go with the compassion of feeling for them, knowing that they are suffering, and then thinking of ways to help alleviate their suffering as best as possible. So I always remember that. I would have liked to have known about this sooner, But again, what you do then with empathy is do what you can to get space from the empathy, no longer feeling all that empathy, maybe just a bit still, and then let yourself fill up with compassion. Now, empathy is felt through the pain centers of the brain. So if you keep on feeling empathy, you will burn out. With compassion, that is felt through the pleasure centers of the brain. So there is always room to continue to feel compassion. You can feel compassion for, basically the suffering in the whole world, and you're going to be all right, and you're not going to burn out from the way you do with feeling lots of empathy, steeped in those painful feeling states directly that you are feeling from others. And for empaths, I understand that this is a hard practice. Getting space as an empath from all the empathy you're feeling around you is something that's a whole other topic I could go into another time. But compassion is something we need to, as an individual and as a people, continue to really practice feeling more of. And then, from there, taking action steps in the world from that place of compassion. Now, fortunately, there's a lot of different practices towards developing and strengthening and widening and deepening, if you will, compassion in yourself. Meditation of different sorts is very helpful. Yoga. There's a lot out there. Of course, much of it initially, the roots of these practices of compassion do come from a lot of Eastern thought, Eastern religions. And also Christian religions through prayer, for example, and practicing compassion through your prayer you're doing. Fortunately, though, through active good listening, compassion can be developed. That's what I, as a psychotherapist, do. But what I'm doing is helping a person find their own self in there that's a good listener too, where they can practice compassion more on themselves, or certainly parts of themselves that they have not felt much compassion for, or any, and therefore by extension have found it hard to feel compassion for others. So I just wanted to put that out there around compassion and the difference between that and empathy, and how compassion can be practiced and felt more and more the more you develop as a human being, the more you live from your heart. And heart consciousness I will talk about at another time, about what that's about. Because fortunately there's a lot of cross-cultural understanding about the heart being the seat or center of compassion in the human individual, in the soul, or whatever you want to call it. There's different wording for that heart-centered, compassionate way of thinking. So thank you for listening, and hope to see you watching me at another one of these check-ins.